Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mutahar. What if I told you the internet's being shut down in places like Iran, ladies and gentlemen? I don't know if I have any Iranian viewers watching me or anything. I wouldn't be able to know today because for anybody that doesn't know, the last couple days, their internet used to be fine and healthy. People used to just be minding their own business, and then boom, the internet's dead. Nobody in the community, nobody in the country is really able to communicate probably with each other, let alone the outside world. Now, you might be like, whoa, what's going on in Iran? Well, Iran's got some crazy protests right now. And when I say really crazy protests, I genuinely mean it, okay? We talked about like Discord, how Discord was used to overthrow a government and stuff. And now you've got situations in Iran where 36 people have actually apparently been killed, according to the human rights activists news agency. Now, again, I'm not going to jump into the how and why of Iran. That's not my point. I'm not an expert in this situation. But what I can talk about is the internet getting shut off and censored. Now, a few months ago, remember when we looked at countries like Afghanistan, where all of a sudden, people just woke up one day and they were like, whoa, I can't access Google.com. And you know why that was? It was because the Taliban had apparently come into the country and they were just like, wait, hold on. We've got people browsing internet porn, okay? Now look, we can ask them for IDs, but I don't think we have the framework for it. They were literally just straight up cutting the internet cables down. So because they cut the internet cables down, everything went to 0%. And when it goes to 0%, there are other scary situations. For instance, airports have to stop flying into your country. Airports have to stop functioning because, lo and behold, having the internet connected is a pretty important thing. Who would have guessed? So without really thinking, the country decided to activate, total shutdown mode. And they didn't realize, the internet's kind of an important thing these days, not just for, airports, but things like hospitals, very critical infrastructure. Now, Iran's a little bit different in this case because they decided to just shut down the internet on people, but it's not totally down. For a lot of ways, the actual government can still use the internet to talk to each other. Obviously, airports are still functional, and very critical infrastructure still actually works. Now, unfortunately, if you're the Iranian people, communicating with the outside world about any atrocity that's going on, or even just talking to your loved ones in the country, has become substantially difficult, okay? You remember a few years ago when I talked about how Canada lost its internet for basically a day, simply because one guy pushed a wrong update all across the entirety of Canada, which is the second largest country in the world, by the way. The internet was basically kaput, especially on mobile devices. Like, you wake up one day and you notice the old no signal bar. Now, I got something to show you guys here before we continue. If you're an Iranian person and you've been shut down by the big bad government, well, there's still a way for you to talk to your loved ones. For instance, on both of these phones, this is an iPhone, this is an Android, okay? They're two smartphones at the end of the day. Now, obviously, when the internet is shut off, this basically means that accessing things like the dark web is impossible. Accessing VPNs is impossible, because when the internet is shut down at the backbone level, your computer is unable to communicate with the VPN service or even with the dark web. You need to actually make a connection to begin with. When the ability to make a connection has been completely fucking removed, well, that's when it gets scary. But it's not impossible. Now, on the App Store, there's an application called BitChat, similar to what it would be on the Play Store. Now, the thing is, if you're an iPhone user, I don't know, I guess you're kind of shit out of luck in Iran because they don't, unless the App Store, unless you can freely share applications, in Iran, which I don't think you can. iPhone users are kind of unfortunately bound to be using the App Store, whereas Android users, because, they're not treated like children, they can actually download and install APKs. It's all up to them. What a novel concept. Treat your user base like actual adults, right? Anyways, using an application known as BitChat, for instance, I'm going to fire it up on both these devices, and you can see that I've had a little bit of a conversation between the two. Now, without any cellular service, without any Wi-Fi, literally using the power of good old-fashioned Bluetooth, these devices are able to type in the words hello, for instance. Like if I type it onto this iPhone, you should be able to see me send something really quickly to this Android device. And if I just hit yes, yeah, I should be able to see it right at the bottom. It's a little bit hard to tell because it's a bit blurry, but honestly, I'll just screenshot and share with you just what it looks like visually. But anyways, these two devices are able to communicate with each other. Now, a whole bunch of other devices can jump into this Bluetooth pond. Now, this is effectively just really having a walkie-talkie, but how many people have like the old school Motorola walkie-talkie sitting around? Everyone's probably got a cell phone, and a cell phone with Bluetooth in today's day and age, I would say. And that means communicating with the people around you becomes a lot easier. That means dissenting against a rogue government that hates you becomes a little bit more easier, especially when you're allowed to communicate. That's the whole reason these governments shut down the internet, is to restrict you from actually being free. Now you might be like, Muda, the range on this probably sucks ass. And you're actually right. Bluetooth would be like, what, 30 to maybe like, I think it's 100 feet or something if you go with like Bluetooth low energy or something of that nature. I'd have to really check there. But because these are mesh networks and they relay messages, you can basically build a community of however many users all sharing these things with each other. It's kind of like looking at people in prison. You know when you're in like a prison and people like relay messages to each other, like one guy writes something, shares it down to like the seventh guy and then back and forth. It's like the most, it's what you have to do when you're being subjugated, ladies and gentlemen. That's just the reality of it. So here's the thing. I know the world is scary, but something that I want to do on my channel is I want each video to have a takeaway. And the takeaway here is that you ain't need no cellular services. You can still communicate with your loved ones if you build these networks out there, right? You know, if you're out in a place like this where you need to talk with your community, share these applications, okay? Now, there are other tools like Meshtastic. Now, I've seen this basically shared around, and I'll be completely real with you. I think it's cool if you're living in an off-grid community, but it's totally impractical if you're in a situation like a government revolt right now. Because to do this, you actually have to purchase multiple devices like these trackers, these start kits, and then you have to flash them and set them up. This would have been cool if the country was sort of built like this initially, but the whole BitChat solution is built primarily so that you can talk in case of, I would say, an emergency. And of course, this application was made surprisingly by Jack Dorsey, I believe the original mind behind Twitter. So, you know, ever since he left the company, I'll be completely real, like that guy's been making some pretty cool stuff, okay? Some pretty cool shit has been made by him that can actually be used in serious emergencies like this. And even if you don't live in countries like Iran, let's say you want just like a private local communication platform. Like let's say you're in like fucking, you're in your community, you're in your school or something, and you just want to talk with somebody, you can just have BitChat, okay? People can have their local community messaging right there, and then everyone can have an off-grid, walkie-talkie texting device if you wanted. Now, if you look carefully at the internet blockage over here, what they've actually done is targeted specifically, according to Cloudflare, something known as IPv6, which is, as you can guess, mostly based for people who are on mobile infrastructure, right? So effectively, IPv6 address space dropped by 98.5%, concurrent with IPv6 dropping from 12 to 1.8%. And so the government is basically blocking the internet access, especially from especially from mobile devices onto the internet, so that people can't communicate with each other and people also can't show atrocities that are happening to the rest of the world. Now, a lot of people say, yo, can we get Starlink there? That would only really work if people in Iran had access to those Starlink-like terminals, which cost hundreds of dollars anyway, so I don't know. I think it's far more expensive for the average Irani to do that. And also you just need, it's like the mesh network stuff, right? Like you needed to have the hardware in place first before all of this shit went down. So ultimately, some of the only options that you may actually have is really just Bluetooth and Wi-Fi local connection, right? You know, one of the things that's also scary about this too, right? Like, obviously, Iran has like sort of this heavy-handed response to censorship, which is like, just shut it down. But obviously, you've got countries like China, for instance, where, you know, in China, if you look at their internet is like a world within its own. You know, it's difficult to access their part of the internet, and it's difficult for their people to reach out of their internet to talk to us. So generally speaking, when you look at the country of China, it's like over 1 billion users who literally talk between themselves. They just have their own internal internet. And, you know, even if like a protest sparked in something like China, do you think that they would just shut the internet down? Probably not, because China has invested so much money into like spying and surveilling their internet that they pretty much have ultimate control over what the fuck actually goes down in their country. Not every other country has that level of control on its people, and thankfully, not every country should. You know, China is only rivaled by other countries like North Korea, where the people are generally too poor to actually afford any bit of hardware, and even the ones that do have access to hardware, you know, there's so few that you really can just monitor each and every person that accesses the internet and talks shit. So that's just the reality, right? The internet is being shut down in parts of the world. Places like Iran, for instance, are going through one of the biggest revolutions in history right now. I would say, especially for their country. For anybody that doesn't know, back in the 70s, they had the Islamic Revolution. So, you know, the old leader, I believe it was Shah Pahlavi, actually like was exiled from the nation. He's sort of sparking up, you know, some level of protest from abroad, and the people, you know, locally don't want this level of despotic, you know, insane dictatorship over them. Nobody should. You know, eventually when you push people enough, they fight back. And when they fight back, sparks be flying. And, you know, the government will do whatever they can to like stop any form of resistance. But, you know, hopefully this is just sort of like the death throes of like a dying dictatorship. And, you know, people who are actually on the ground, they're affected by this shit. You know, people who run businesses in Iran, people who are, you know, fucking streamers or YouTubers even. I don't even know if YouTube is available out in Iran, to be honest with you. But people who, you know, are in the country who are just living their day-to-day life, who all of a sudden completely got cut off from the rest of the world and amongst each other, should have some options. So if you're out there right now, shit be tough, stay safe. And if you need to message the people around you, there are some applications that let you at least walkie-talkie to the people there. And if more people use applications like BitChat, then eventually you'll build a large enough network that communities can actually communicate with each other with the freedom that they should have as fucking human beings. Anyways, that's my fucking TED Talk. I wanted to kind of talk about this because I think any form of internet censorship is important to discuss, and honestly discussing the technology behind it, even if it's just like, you know, some people look at this as like, oh, they just came and cut down the internet. Not entirely. The internet's still there. It's just when you have the internet that fires up, you know, you have to remember every time you purchase an internet package, you go through internet service providers, and the internet service providers at any moment can have the big bad government come down and basically clamp down on you. And even if it's not shutting down the internet, remember, even in countries as free as the United States, back in the day, you know, you had agencies like the FBI come in and read people's emails or have the ability to at least surveil mass amounts of emails because some ISPs just let them get access, stick their devices in, and grab a whole bunch of data that they probably shouldn't. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you know, if you want to fight against censorship, you know, things like the dark web, things like Signal, things like encryption are very important. But when the internet is shut off, all those avenues become logistically impossible to access. And at that point, you know, short of like using carrier fucking pigeons, using Bluetooth might be one of the only options you have left. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I'm out.